So keeping on the theme of generosity, I was going to talk about all those ways we can experience and cultivate generosity of the spirit. So, but as I say the word cultivate, I'm going to go back a step and talk about the word in Pali, the language of the original Buddhist text, that we translate as meditation. And that word is bhavana, B-H-A-V-A-N-A, and it literally means cultivation. So the spirit of meditation is like cultivating the ground. And that implies certain things, right? Like, we do our part, but we can't hurry nature along. It's not going to happen any faster because we're insistent or we're impatient. We cultivate the ground, and there's a kind of letting go also. Joseph, it's fun to tell stories about him. I don't think he's here. But he tells the stories himself. I think he was about 9 years old and grew his first and I believe his only garden. And he got so kind of excited and impatient when the little green fluffy stuff started coming up on top of the carrots that he just pulled them up to help them grow faster. So he didn't have much of a harvest, so that was why he was his only garden thus far. So you can feel your way into just that energy, you know, like we do our part, we're there, we accompany the process, but we're not demanding, we're not insistent, we're not in our usual pretty acquisitive mind state, which tends to be something like, you know, if I have like a big breakthrough by Saturday night, I can leave early. You know, I'll go to Honolulu, right? Which is more a normal mind state. So there's a sense of, there's a spirit of patience, allowing, accompanying, hanging in there. And in some Tibetan schools of practice, instead of meditation and instead of cultivation, they have this really cute phrase they use, which I like a lot, which is getting used to it, or getting familiar with it. So when we say meditation, they would say getting used to it. And that, of course, brings up the very big question, like, what's it? And this seems based on a belief that just as human beings having a life, we have pretty much had extraordinary experiences of connection, of clarity, of love. But we don't tend to live there. We don't tend to be awfully used to them. Even sometimes tremendous suffering can strip away so much that we're there. But maybe we have this experience through inspiration, through love, through whatever, and we think, what was that? I think I'll not tell anyone about that, or I think I'll tell everyone about that. Or mostly, I don't know how to get back there. So when we say we practice meditation, what they are saying is, we're not coming from such a place of deficiency, or certainly not defectiveness. We've had these experiences, and what we do is we're practicing getting back to and abiding with the deepest places we have known, right? So it's also a different energy than the kind of desperate, like, this is the 100th thing I'm trying this month, you know, to like finally be like a good person or be happy. It's not like that. It's a very different spirit of cultivation, actually, to learn to trust, recover, be back with, and abide in these deep places, because we have known them, actually. So that's really what we do when we practice meditation. There are whole schools of meditation and whole styles of meditation where they're designed to try to bring us as close as possible to our direct experience, so that we're not so embroiled in the story about the experience, which tends to come pretty quickly. And that gives us a cleaner, clearer experience of what actually is. I'll tell you another Joseph story. It's so much fun. Of course, I don't know what he'll say about me, but Joseph and I were teaching somewhere once, and having a cup of tea, just having a cup of tea in the kitchen, and someone came into the kitchen in some distress and said to Joseph, I just had this really terrible experience. And Joseph said, well, what happened? And he said, I felt all this tension in my jaw, and I realized what an incredibly uptight person I am and how I always have been and I always will be. And Joseph said, you mean you felt a lot of tension in your jaw? And he said, yes, and I've never been able to get close to people. It's never going to change. Joseph said, you mean you felt a lot of tension in your jaw? And it was really interesting for me, like watching them go back and forth and back and forth. And finally Joseph said something to him like, why are you adding a miserable self-image to a painful experience? It's like painful enough, and genuinely so, to feel the tension in our jaw, but on top of that, we now have a world where I'm going to be alone for the rest of my life. So sometimes when we talk about mindfulness and that whole range of practices designed to help us see more truthfully what is actually happening, or based on mindfulness, we say we look for the add-ons. That's what we're trying to relinquish the hold of. Not the experience itself. We're not trying to dismiss anything or overlook anything or deny anything, but it's all those add-ons, it's all those stories. And not all stories are wrong, not all are negative. Some stories really bring us together. They open doors of possibility, but we want to have a choice, right? What do we want to actually let go of? Oh, thank you. And what do we want to take to heart and to foster? So we want to be able to distinguish the actual experience from the story that comes pretty quickly. And mindfulness can do that. It's even quicker when it's practiced. So then we know for ourselves, do I want to go there, do I not want to go there? There's another whole range of practices that are designed differently. And they're designed more for what I sometimes call the stretch, where we realize, you know, I'm awfully accustomed to paying attention from a certain angle, in a certain way. What happens when I pay attention from a different angle? Or I look differently at my experience. And these practices take intentionality, they take kind of conscious effort, not force, not coercion, not violence, but they do take intentionality, because it's like saying, I'm going to test this habit of perception, of awareness, and I'm going to look in another way. So it will take that kind of consciousness, and some people don't like that whole kind of practice, because they fear that they're moving from a truthful place to a place of make-believe, you know, or denial or wishful thinking. But they're really not that way. It's like moving from a truthful place to another truthful place where we don't tend to go very often. Those other places don't get much airtime. So, for example, if you are the kind of person who tends to judge yourself a lot, pretty negatively, and at the end of the day, you kind of look back at the day almost to evaluate yourself, like, how did I do today? And let's just say you're the kind of person who pretty well only remembers the mistakes you made and the things you did wrong and what was really flawed and what you could have said better, let's just say. So the other perspective would be like, anything else happened today? Any good within me? That takes some effort for many of us. But again, it's not forced, and you're not denying the problems, and you're not being conflict avoidant, and you're not, you know, afraid to look at pain. But what else happened today? What's the good within me? What's the good within my life? So we stretch to include rather than exclude this kind of unaccustomed place. Another great example of that would be gratitude practice, where many researchers and psychologists at this point would say that one of the healthiest things any of us could do is keep a gratitude journal. And that is, at the end of the day, write down 3 things you're grateful for from the day. Well, somebody told me they were undertaking a practice of looking for 1 thing a month. And I thought, 1 thing a month is a little sparse, you know, like, because you can use, like, breathing, that's a good thing, you know, like, it doesn't have to be grandiose or magnificent. So let's say 3 a day, if you can do that. And I also say, you know, in truth, for me, that doesn't come naturally. It will not come automatically. It takes that kind of conscious effort or intentionality. All my conditioning, my personal conditioning, my familial conditioning, my cultural conditioning is such that I'm so much more likely to come to the end of the day and think about what I can complain about. You know, I didn't show up the way I wanted to, and that other person disappointed me, and it's always an airline, there's always a phone service, you know, and that's just where my mind will go out of habit. So it takes that stretch to say, okay, all that may be true. I'm not saying it's a perfect experience this day, but what else is there? You know, evolution, some evolutionary bias, most evolutionary biologists, not everyone, but many would say we have a negativity bias, that we're kind of trained to look for danger, for threat, or for what's wrong. It takes some effort to savor the good, to take delight, to allow the joy, to allow the pleasure. One of my most often told stories is about coming to Maui for this retreat for the first time, and it was really, really, really a miserable cold season in the East Coast already, and I got to come to Maui, you know, to be with Ramdas and friends, and, you know, of course it's gorgeous, and then it was obviously a public thing because it was a retreat, but I did something extra when I got here, like I tweeted or something, oh, I'm on Maui, and I started getting all these comments and, you know, things back. You're on Maui. It's so incredible. And I immediately had a reaction. And I started writing people saying, it's very humid here. It's horribly humid. It's not nearly as nice as you think. You know, and I told that story here in the hall, and I was leaving one day, and just behind me was a friend and the now adult son of another friend. And he was saying to her, oh, my mother really wanted to come to this retreat, and she came so close, and she ended up thinking she couldn't do it. Now she feels so full of regret that she didn't make it. And I heard my friend say to him, did you tell her how humid it is here? You know, and every year somebody writes me and says, how humid is it? So I just saw this canister of anti-humidity hairspray, which we're gonna post everywhere, just so people know it's still a problem. You know, so for many of us, the stretch is in that direction, actually. Can we allow the joy and the delight and all of that range of things? So loving kindness practice fits squarely in that style of practice, where we're paying attention differently. We're paying attention differently to ourselves, especially if we have that habit of incessant self-criticism. We're just wishing ourselves well. Look at that. Loving kindness and all its attendant qualities, which I'll talk about in a second, are practices of generosity, the generosity of the spirit. It may never involve, although it could, of course, but it doesn't have to involve material goods. It's paying attention, the gift of our attention, the gift of our wishing well, our care. Maybe it's thanking somebody we normally just discount, or it's certainly paying attention to those we normally discount. One of the underlying principles of loving kindness practice is a belief from the Buddhist teaching that everybody actually wants to be happy. We all want, not superficial happiness, but a sense of belonging somewhere. Really being at home somewhere, in this body, in this mind, with one another, on this planet. We all want that, and it's the force of ignorance that confuses us and leads us astray, and just takes over sometimes and has us make tremendous mistakes. And if you just think for a moment about some of your conditioning, about where happiness is to be found, it's interesting, isn't it? I was once teaching, actually I'd gone to Israel to teach. It's the only time I've been there in the 90s. And I was there early, and I was walking in Jerusalem through the old city, through the marketplace, which is this series of alleyways just teeming with goods for sale and, sights and sounds and all of that. So I was just walking along, and then I heard this merchant call out after me, "Oh, I have what you need." And I stopped. I got so excited. I thought, wow, he has what I need. And I turned around to go toward him, and I thought, wait a minute, I don't need anything. And second of all, how would he know he has what I need? But we hear that voice incessantly in this society, in this world. I have what you need, and 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 we get dizzy and full of hope, and then we're crushed, and we're running, and we're confused, and the whole process we're engaged in is kind of stopping and saying, what do I need right now in order to be happy? And so that's fundamental. And then we experiment. What's it like to wish ourselves well instead of just going into the 50th hour of criticizing ourselves for a mistake that we've made? What's it like to pay attention fully to someone we normally look right through, right? Who we objectify, who just doesn't count for us. Not even only through bias or prejudice, but just indifference. What's it like to remember that our own actions, when we're overcome with ignorance, we get confused, we believe some of those voices which are really not true, and we do something or we say something. What's it like to remember that came from a place of pain and disconnection? And then to understand that's true for others as well. So the 4 qualities talked about together are known as the 4 Brahma Viharas, or divine abodes, or one translation I heard for Brahma once is best, which I liked a lot. And Vihara means dwelling or abiding or home. So taken together, these 4 qualities form our best home. And like any home, we may not be there all the time, but we know what it's like when we get back there. It should be the place, could be the place, where we feel most authentic, most alive, most relaxed, or home. The first quality is metta, or loving kindness itself. Loving kindness is the translation of metta that's most commonly used. And I've also had scholars and translators come up to me and say, well, why don't you just say love? Stop being so cutesy, You mean love, say love. And I appreciate that, but it's very complicated, isn't it? Like, what do we mean when we say love? It could mean lots and lots of different things. The literal translation of metta is friendship, but I tend these days not to use that so much. Because for me, friendship implies wanting to spend time together, wanting to hang out together. Let's go to the movies together, let's have dinner together. Whereas one of the ways of understanding metta that's very important actually is that we're talking about a free heart. We're talking about an uncluttered heart. We're actually not talking about behavior being mandated in some way. Because once we do that, then our world gets very small. I can only say yes. I have to give them more money. I have to give them my rent-controlled apartment. I have to be sweet, right? Whereas we know there's such a thing as tough love, there's such a thing as fierce compassion. We may have a completely, genuinely loving heart, and our best guess of the most appropriate way to work with something or be responsive to something or someone in that moment. It's all contextual. That particular relationship, that particular moment in time. Maybe we have this pure heart of generosity, of caring, of giving, and we think, you know what? It's not safe for me to be there. Or, you know, it's not balanced. Maybe I need to take care of myself in a different way. And that doesn't mean that the loving kindness or the love is shallow or insufficient, or it's discernment, it's understanding. I do call it our best guess. And so therefore friendship doesn't quite work for me these days in terms of that. Well, it's what the translation is. I tend to just use the word connection. It's a powerful sense of connection, that our lives have something to do with one another, that we all could have a sense of belonging if we can relinquish the hold of some of these kinds of conditioning, that we share this life, we share this planet, that it is truly an interconnected universe. Like it or not, that's not always so nice to think about, you know? Like, what happens over there doesn't nicely stay over there, actually. I remember years ago when, you know, there was a kind of terrible series of incidents in Japan. I can't remember the exact year, you know, culminating in Fukushima and the nuclear kind of meltdown. And I was reading a lot of international press online at the time, and there was a French newspaper that had a headline that said something like, radioactive material flowing across the Pacific due to fortuitous winds. And I thought, yeah, maybe they're fortuitous if you're in France, but they're not that fortuitous if you're here, you know, or Seattle or someplace. And anyway, don't we believe anymore the Earth is round and it can kind of come around the other side, you know? It's like, where's the blockade that's going to keep us safe? It's just not that way. The reality of life is not that way. Our lives are interconnected, and so part of the power of loving kindness is that it brings us closer to that truth. It's empowered by the truthfulness of that statement. Our lives do have something to do with one another. That's how things are. So the next quality that accompanies that, or is a part of that vision, is compassion. Which, it's also, I find these are complex states, they're intricate states, they're not that easy to understand. Compassion can mean many things. One of the definitions is trembling or the quivering of the heart in response to seeing pain or suffering. So it's a movement of the heart, and it's a movement toward, to see if we can be of help. Right? So it's not a movement into, to burn up ourselves or be destroyed. It's a movement toward, to see if we can be of help. So it's really a pure generosity, because who knows? How many times do we try to make a difference, or we're moved towards someone's situation and we do what we can, and we don't get immediate gratification always, right? So many times we're just planting a seed. And if we're lucky, we find out later, oh, you know what? You gave me that book and it meant nothing to me, and I just kind of put it down, so I couldn't tell. And now my life is so different. These years later, you know, I had this whole other thing happen to me, and I picked up the book, and it was perfect. And you think, wow, I never could have told that 3 years ago, you know? But it was planting a seed. So many times it's really like that. Sometimes we have a view of compassion which is, you know, it's almost extreme, or it's it's fashioned in such a way that you wonder how anyone can survive it. I'm told that, you know, if you Google something, it sends suggestions right away for what it thinks you're searching for, because so many people in the past have searched just for that. So I'm told if you Google compassion, you see fatigue very quickly, which is a favorite phrase for people these days. So in some research circles, and certainly in Buddhist circles, that definition I just used would actually be divided in half. The trembling or the quivering of the heart in response to seeing pain or suffering, that responsiveness, that kind of vibratory in the body knowing or felt sense of what someone's likely going through, that's the first part. That's empathy. How we respond to that felt sense is possibly with compassion, moving toward to see if we can be of help, which also implies a kind of balance, right? And wisdom and perspective and steadiness. Because actually we might feel, and often might, in fact feel, that kind of resonance with someone's situation, and it's not good, it's pretty painful, and we're frightened by that, and we want to run away, or turn the other way, or we're exhausted. We're depleted. We feel, I have nothing left inside. You know what it's like when you're in that state and someone comes and tells you their rather sad story and you're thinking, please just go away. Please, I can't. I can't. Although you may not try to show it, you know, you try not to show it, but you're exhausted. Or maybe, this just happened to me. I was talking to a therapist who told me he was finding himself blaming all of his clients. Like, I'm sure none of you work from home, so don't worry. He said they tell him a story and he think, I told you 6 months ago what to do. If you'd only listened, you know, you'd be a lot better off now. So maybe we do that, you know, we kind of resonate with somebody and we think, oh, come on, you know, you could have gotten it together long ago, and I gave you very good advice. Or maybe we get, you know, we have that genuine moment of empathy, and we need that, you know, rather than being so cold and removed. And we feel that, but then we get into that strange sort of savior thing, like, I'm going to fix it. I am going to be the one to fix it. I'm in charge of the universe after all. Or we can have the compassionate response, which is one option, moving toward to see if we can be of help, right? So compassion is a powerful, powerful state to explore. The third of these qualities after loving kindness and compassion is something called sympathetic joy, which is really pure generosity. And that is being happy for the happiness of others. Rather than seeing someone else's good fortune or success and thinking, ew, I wish you had a little bit less going for you right now, you know. You know, the light doesn't have to go away altogether, but if it could just dim a bit, you know, I feel better about myself, which is a very common feeling. We might well have the conditioning that I don't have enough, I have nothing, that's forever, you have everything, and you will forever. I mean, there's all kinds of conditioning at play here which distort reality, because of course nothing is forever, and it's not that I have nothing. Remember the gratitude practice, I might have nothing I'm paying attention to, but it's not like I have nothing, and it's unlikely you have everything, in fact. Right? So, and what a relief, you know, to, some people are like that, I also find. They're just like that naturally. Something good happens for you, and they're so happy for you. And it feels like such a gift. And other people, you tell them what just happened, and like they may smile, but like, you really get the feeling they would be fine if it fell apart. And it feels so terrible. Like my happiness is hurting this person somehow. And yet, for most of us, it's not that natural a thing, and we can cultivate it. We actually can practice it through the evolution of loving kindness. That's what happens, is that this is part of that development. It's part of the cultivation, inevitably. And then the last of the qualities after loving kindness and compassion and sympathetic joy is equanimity. So equanimity can sound awfully dull, and it's also a strange word. When I was at my very first meditation retreat in Bodh Gaya, India, the teacher was S.N. Goenka, and he used to say all the time, be equanimous, be equanimous, be equanimous. And we used to whisper to one another, is that a word? What does that mean? I don't know what that means. So it doesn't mean apathy. It does not mean indifference. It actually means balance. And in this case, it's the balance born of wisdom. So it's like perspective. It's understanding, you know what? I'm not in charge of the universe. I'm not in control. I will do everything I can to be generous, with my energy, my caring, my presence, and it's not up to me. I once said with a group that I felt if only I were in charge of the universe, it would be a lot better a world. And somebody called out and they said, are you sure? And I thought about it and I said, I am really sure. It would be a lot better. And you know what? It's not going to be that way. It doesn't mean we're ineffectual. It doesn't mean there's nothing to try. It doesn't mean we need to withdraw. But if you actually look, and I think this is an interesting reflection, look at when you do withdraw. What prompts it? It's usually not an excess of balance, right? It's frustration. It's a sense of helplessness. I should be able to change this, and I can't. I can't stand that. Take a look. I think it's a very powerful reflection. The more balance we have, in fact, the more we can hang in there and be present and be caring and be generous without all that immense frustration and impatience. So equanimity is also considered like the secret ingredient in the other three. It allows loving kindness to be a freely given gift. A friend of mine once called loving kindness when a great deal of attachment, in the sense that Joseph was using the word, like control, comes in. And when we do loving kindness, which we're about to do in a few seconds, rather than resting your attention on the feeling of the breath, we rest our attention on the silent repetition of certain phrases, like, may you be happy, may you be peaceful. That's the gift, that's the offering. And this friend of mine said that when there's no equanimity holding it up, it becomes what he called metta with an edge, like, may you be happy by, let's say, Tuesday. I think I can give you till Tuesday. Like, I have a long list of people to make happy, and you're at the top of the list now, but you're not going to stay on the top of the list, so hurry up. And speaking of lists, here's your list of everything you should change to be happy, as I see it, right? That's different than a freely given gift, like, may you be happy, may you be peaceful. So equanimity is actually always there. It means wisdom is always there. We want wisdom to be there. We want perspective. I never used to like the word balance. I thought it was unattractive, it was unexciting, it was like dull. But think about it, to have a sense of resource and not feel compelled to fix everything and be in charge. To have a sense of compassion for yourself as well as for others. To have a sense of loving kindness and compassion, and to realize, you know what? I can't fix it. Or to realize, I have compassion for you and I so powerfully disagree with your actions that I'm going to fight. I'm going to fight those actions. But maybe without so much hatred in my heart, right? These are very real understandings that we come to in a kind of embodied way as we do the practice. Okay, so we do, how many of you have done loving kindness practices? Part of your, whoa, hey, that's so nice. It is, as I said, you know, it's another way of practicing, it's another stream. It's not going to feel just like paying attention or being mindful. And as I said, instead of resting our attention on the feeling of the breath, we rest our attention on the silent repetition of certain phrases. Sometimes people get hung up because of the common translation, or like, may I, may you know, may I be happy, may I be peaceful, may you be happy, may you be peaceful. People often ask, well, who are we asking? And I say, we're not asking anybody. It's not, we're not pleading, we're not imploring. It's like you hand someone a birthday card, you say, may you have a happy birthday. May you have a great new year. Right? It's got some juice to it. It's not an affirmation practice. It's not the same as I am happy, or you are happy. It's best thought of as gift giving, as offering, as blessing, whether toward ourselves or toward others. And the words will be imperfect because they're words, but it's just a way of serving us by carrying the heart's energy. Classically, we begin that offering to ourselves, and we go through, not all in one session, but over time, we go through a range of different relationships until we come to all beings everywhere, to all of life. Now that's way too much to do in any one session usually, so what we usually say is we start with loving kindness for ourselves. I'll say a few more words about that in a minute. We start with ourselves, and then we end that session with loving kindness toward all and kind of the boundlessness of life. And what we do in the middle may change all the time. Like maybe you have a friend having surgery this day, you know, they're going to be the being you include in the middle part, or your friend's daughter's graduating from high school, they're going to be included in the middle part, or there's a great section that is actually my favorite called the neutral person. It's someone you don't strongly like or dislike. And the key there is that it's suggested you choose someone you'll tend to see now and then, because you'll know if there's a change in the way you feel about them, not when you're sitting there, but when you actually encounter them. And it's actually true. It's the most interesting thing to me, because I think it reflects the whole way the practice works, which is that we're actually paying attention to someone rather than ignoring them or disdaining them, or, you know, hyper-categorizing them so we're not paying attention anymore. So I went to Burma in 1985. I did 3 months of loving kindness practice. And I chose as my neutral person, because I was there for 3 months. It was long enough. I chose someone else who was there meditating. She was my neutral person, and I can't honestly say I felt some huge wave of love, you know, in the ordinary sense. And then she left, let's say a month before I did, 3 weeks or a month before I did. And I happened to run into her in the streets of Bangkok once I left, and my heart just exploded. It was like, there she is. That's my neutral person. And I'm sure to each other I was insane, you know, I was like, it's you. And then just this last year, she'd been traveling with a man, an American, who I also had not known before. Just this last year I saw him in California, and he brought her up. He said, I remember that woman I was traveling with at the time? And I looked at him and I said, she was my neutral person. And he knew exactly what I meant. You know, so it's interesting to see the evolution of this outside of the formal arena of practice, which is where you actually see it. You know, so I have a friend who chose her dry cleaner as the neutral person, and so maybe you do the same, and you go to the dry cleaner that day, so that's who comes in the middle part. You know, it's very creative and very individual. So The underlying principle in terms of the sequence is that we're supposed to do it in the easiest way possible. And that's theoretically why you start with yourself. And if that isn't going to fly, which it often doesn't, start with someone else. You know, it's not obligatory that you do it. It's more helpful to do it according to that principle than anything. So maybe you start with your puppy, or the benefactor, who classically is the second category, yourself and then a benefactor, is someone who's helped you. Maybe they've helped pick you up when you've fallen down, or they've inspired you from afar. Or the texts say, this is the one who when you think of them, you smile. It just lifts you, right? Maybe you start there. And tuck yourself in later. You kind of have to be there somewhere. But I've had people say, you know, I was doing loving kindness for all beings everywhere, and I popped up like a pop-up ad on the computer, like, it's me. And that was okay. Anything, you know. And whatever you're doing, don't insist that you feel some great wave of engulfing bliss in order to think the practice is working. It is working, it's true. But you may not notice it till you're in that store with the dry cleaner, or you've made a mistake in your work and you have to pick up and start over. Something like that, okay? So common phrases, you don't have to use these phrases, but if you're not used to it, I'd say use them for now. And if you have other phrases, all you people who raise your hand, use them, it doesn't matter. But common phrases beginning with oneself are things like, may I be safe, or feel safe, some people prefer. May I be safe, be happy, be healthy, live with ease. Now, health obviously means many different things. You know, the deepest sense of that whole. May I be safe, be happy, be healthy, live with ease. Live with ease means in the things of day-to-day life, like livelihood and family, may not be such a struggle. May I live with ease. And then we want phrases that are broad enough so that we can make the offering to others without constantly needing to think of new phrases. So it can't be, you know, may the humidity fade tomorrow, you know, or whatever. That's why it's things like happy, healthy, you know, because we don't have to constantly churn out new phrases. And sometimes we do, because the person or being appears, and it's almost like a new set of phrases comes with them, but that's fine. You just don't want to spend hours thinking, well, you know. So I'd suggest for this sitting, you use those phrases as an experiment if you don't have others, okay? So sit comfortably if you can. You want to stretch first? Get up, move. Yes, you do, don't you? I don't know when this bell goes back to the auction table, but maybe it has to visit there. It does, okay. Okay, see if you can sit comfortably. You can close your eyes or not, however you feel most at ease. If you get really sleepy or antsy as your eyes are closed, it's fine to open your eyes and just continue on. See if your energy can like settle into your body. And if you have 3 or 4 phrases, that could be the conduit for the heart's energy, beginning with yourself. And just gather all your energy behind one phrase at a time. And repeat the phrases with enough space and enough silence so that it's a rhythm that's pleasing to you. This is like the song of the heart. You don't have to be in a hurry. Remember the feeling of offering, gift giving, blessing. May I be safe. Be happy. Be healthy. Live with ease, or whatever your phrases might be. And if you find your attention has wandered, doesn't matter, it's really okay. See if you can let go of whatever has distracted you gently. And with kindness toward yourself, just bring your attention back to the phrases. If you have to let go and begin again a whole lot of times, it's fine. See if a benefactor comes to mind, someone who's helped you, who makes you smile. And even if the words don't quite make sense, remember they're carrying our heart's energy. Offer the phrases to them. And if the phrases need to change, that's fine. But don't like deliberate, you know, what should I say? And if no one comes to mind, don't despair. You can just continue on with offering loving kindness to yourself, or maybe move on to a friend, that'd be fine. And just for fun, for a few moments, let's have the benefactor offer loving kindness to you. So you put yourself in the position of the recipient as they are repeating, may you be happy, may you be peaceful, whatever the phrases are. And just notice how you feel. Maybe you're embarrassed, maybe you're grateful, maybe you can't stand it another moment. Whatever the feelings are, see if they can wash through you as you steady your attention on the phrases. Think of somebody here you didn't know before you got here. You may not know their name or anything about them, but you can get just a feeling for them that this is like a generic living being who wants to be happy just as we do, because it's true for everyone. That is as vulnerable to pain and loss as we all are, because that's true for everyone. See what happens as you offer the phrases of loving kindness to them. And then everybody here, which involves a whole variety of different relationships, those whom you may know quite well, those whom you don't know at all, and yourself. So phrases become something like, may we be safe, be happy, be healthy, live with ease, or whatever phrases you're using. And then all beings everywhere, all people, all creatures, all those in existence, near and far, known and unknown. May all beings be safe, be happy, be healthy, live with ease. So thank you, all beings, thank you. We have a little bit of time for questions, if we have a microphone. And then we'll take a break. You can just raise your hand and, if so, or we can just bask in the energy. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Anand. You've spoken of
Could you hold it a little closer?
generosity toward others. What about the recipients of our generosity? Could you say a few words about that?
And what do you mean by?
Well, giving generosity, extending generosity is selfish, not in a bad way. But when you receive generosity, maybe I don't want a puppy.
Maybe you don't want what?
A puppy. Maybe my granddaughter wants to give me a puppy, but I don't want a puppy. I can't deal with a puppy. But there must be a skillful way of dealing with this sort of situation.
Sure. Well, one of the, even the old-fashioned translations for equanimity has to do with boundaries. I mean, I'm assuming your granddaughter is as cute as they always are, you know, and the energy of wanting to get you a puppy is a beautiful thing. It's just not practical, maybe, you know, and so receiving that energy is glorious. And yet, you know, being able to say, you know what, draw me a puppy, or, you know, let's get me a stuffed one, or, you know, like, let's sit and just, like, let's figure out how to make a donation to a place that's feeding puppies that have nowhere else to go, or, you know, and really enjoying and relishing, really, the energy of the generosity, but not the puppy. Anyone want a puppy? He's got one. You know, and in the same way, it's like skillful speech, you know, it's like, when somebody is offering us something, you may not want to say, it's the last thing in the world I want, you know. There may be another way of saying it. That, you know, I really appreciate the thought, but I'm traveling for the next 6 months. I can't really have a puppy. Or even sometimes just take, I mean, it depends what it is, you know, but, you know, sometimes you just accept it, and I'm laughing because, I don't know if any of you had this plan, but, you know, traveling so much and like right now, if one of you handed me Joseph's book as a gift, I'd have no room to put it anywhere. And people do that, you know, like, oh, I know you're getting on a plane, but here's this 7,000-pound manuscript. I know you'll really enjoy it. Maybe you just accept it and you mail it, you know, or you take care of it in some way. You don't always have to say, you know, that's ludicrous. So please don't give me Joseph's book, whatever you do. I happen to have a copy, and for many books that size, I try to do it on Kindle anyway. So I don't know where the microphone is.
Hi, thank you so much for your talk. I was wondering how you can strive to be more generous with a friend or a family member who's hurt you.
I mean, I think it's, you know, likely going to be kind of energetic or generosity of the spirit. Although, like I said yesterday, there's this very kind of quirky teaching of the Buddhas, which I've actually come to appreciate, where he said, if you're angry at someone, give them a gift. And I used to think that's ludicrous, but it's kind of interesting sometimes. You know, like, we get so into the rut of you're the person who did this and you said that, and that's, you know, and we never see any other facet of a person, or we can't even believe they exist as bigger than that terrible thing they said, or whatever, and then you give them a gift, and sometimes all that drops away, and it's like, oh, look at that. But short of that, it's likely to be a question of wishing them well, and that can also seem beyond. So that's a case where the phrases might need to change. I've had people say, the most I can say is, may you be free of hatred, because I have felt really that I've suffered tremendously because of their hatred. You know, and that's what I can say, and that's fine. You don't have to feel you have to fit into a formula, you know, and put it in a box. But it's also true that we are our own laboratory, and the more we look at our experience, I think we do see that the source of when we have been disconnected and we've harmed and we've, you know, said something really dreadful, it comes from a place of pain within us, and we can count on it really coming from a place within them. Now, it's hard because that's not always obvious. I was on a stage in this church in Berkeley not too long ago, and it was several Tibetan teachers, one who had just gotten off the plane from Tibet, and several Western teachers, and someone in the audience asked this question. He said, I know that when I look at myself, that when I've really hurt someone, it's coming from a place of pain within me, but I look at these people on the public stage who are just acting in a way that I consider so harmful, and they don't look like they're in pain. They look pretty happy. They look like they're quite satisfied with themselves. I don't know what to do with that. And there was like total silence from everyone on the stage. And finally I said, I'm with you, you know. I really understand. I said, sometimes I think if they could only look a little ruffled at the edges, you know, like, then I'd have an entree, but I just come back to myself. I know that that's where those actions come from in me. And so even if someone looks a little too smug for my satisfaction in their wrongness, I really do believe that it is coming from a place of pain. And so it may not be loving kindness, it may be a kind of compassion, but compassion always comes with equanimity, you know, with wisdom. So it's not saying you're right, it's not saying I'm giving in, it's not saying I hope you do it again, but it is acknowledging that place of pain. And I wouldn't say it's crummy or secondary. People often say that, you know, I know my loving kindness is really impure because I keep thinking if they were happier, they wouldn't be such a jerk. And I say, I don't think that's greed, I think that's science. You know, I think that's fine. If any of us were happier, we would behave better. And so knowing that, it's not something you have to erase, that knowledge. The man with the mic is in charge.
Thank you, Sharon, for giving such a lovely translation of metta into English. And as loving kindness, I've heard benevolence.
Yeah, benevolence is good.
What are your thoughts? Would you elaborate?
About benevolence?
Right.
Yeah, I think benevolence is good. You know, it's like non-harming energy. You know, so the energetic relationship is wishing well. You know, even for someone who is a jerk in our eyes, you know, like realizing, oh, they would be less harmful in truth if they were happier. So we want them to be happier.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, I think this might be the last question.
Thanks. Hi. I have a question about devotion, actually, because here you are surrounded by all of these devotional objects, and sometimes when I'm, well, especially here, or when you're with Krishna and Das, I sometimes feel like I'm juggling, right? Like I'm going from something that's kind of like devotion, but isn't, you know, in terms of like
loving kindness
practice or mindfulness even. So, and also it's interesting that on my way here I was thinking about the word bhav. You know, Sharon Das always used to say, just stay in the bhav. And then, of course, it's the same root, right, as bhavana, but I don't know. So it's something about how do you see devotion as separate or the same as what we're doing with loving kindness?
With loving kindness? I think you could see it as a facet of loving kindness, or you could see it as distinct. It doesn't matter. Distinct doesn't mean divorced from, you know, or that there's like unbridgeable gaps or something. It's just the way I after all these years, would distinguish compassion from loving kindness, because there's just a somewhat different flavor, but certainly they arise together, or we go back and forth very readily, or, you know, if you're feeling into someone's wishing to be happy, it has more of that flavor of loving kindness. If you're feeling into that vulnerability we all share, because it's true, you know, you walk along and your phone rings and you can have a different life after you take that message, you know, it's true for everybody, and you know, that leads to compassion, and so it's just got its own flavor. In Tibetan practice, they would say that if you really understand the truth of things, you know, so you see how interconnected we are, you see the nature of life more truthfully, you will develop two things most strongly, devotion and compassion. You know, so the devotion comes from an appreciation of those qualities, of and a belief in, you know, the possibility of boundless love, and artfulness. Like I always think of Ram Dass being told, love everyone and tell the truth, when as far as he knew, telling the truth meant he didn't love everybody. You know, I think, what an amazing guru to put you right there, you know? And I think it through sometimes in different ways. I think, well, is the deepest truth that we do love everybody, and that it's only when we get to that place we appreciate it. So sometimes I come down there. Sometimes I think he was just being toyed with, you know, until he'd give up thinking altogether. You know, and there's a huge appreciation that is possible for that. I think a lot depends on trust and really feeling the motivation of that being, or, you know, the Buddha, or, you know, I mean, it doesn't have to be a guru, it could be a more mythical kind of being, you know, for us. That they are exemplars. Otherwise, how would we really know what was possible? because it's certainly not what most of us are taught is possible, or even desirable. Like when I started writing more about loving kindness, which of course has been some years now, or even my last book, my most recent book, I don't like calling it my last book, lest it is, and I'm writing a book right now. My most recent book, Real Love, and there's a whole section on loving all beings. And I was talking to a friend of mine, a good friend of mine, about it, and she looked like completely aghast, and she looked at me and she said, "You mean I have to love Stalin?" And I said, "Stalin? Who worries about Stalin anymore?" You know, like, that's like, why is he the line? You know, like, it seems very old. Like, you know, but how many people would you say, "I'm working to love all beings," and they'd say that's a good thing? Not many in ordinary life, right? And yet we have these beings that remind us, oh, this is not only possible, this is really what you want. So, okay, we need to stop. So, thank you.